DraftSociety.com presents a Premier League Draft Fantasy Podcast. Welcome to the Key Pass Collective, your exclusive source for the information, analysis, and advice you need to dominate your fantasy leagues. Come on in. We've been expecting you.
What's going on, draft heads? Welcome back to the Key Pass Collective. This is the third episode in our Draft 101 series. My name's Joe Williams. Welcome back again. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, in your first two Draft 101 episodes, you learned what is draft? What is this draft game you speak of? After that, you learned where you can play draft. And today, I guess it's only natural that we talk about how to actually set up and have a draft. So as you know, we've already talked about basically, you get your mates together. You've got a league. You got 8 to 12 guys, and you're ready to go. You are ready to draft, and you are going in under the understanding that, guess what? Because this game is what it is, and this is the reason we love it, each player is only able to be on one team. So only one manager in your league can have Mohamed Salah. Only one manager in your league can have Heung-min Son. Only one manager in your league can have Erling Haaland. This makes the draft the drama and the suspense that it is. So how do I set up this draft? Well, there are many different ways that you can do this, and today we're going to talk about a number of them. We'll talk about not only how do you organize the draft in terms of how people make their picks and the options behind that, but we'll also talk about a couple of different ways that you can actually draft that are different from the norm and also quite fun. So real quick, first things first, if you have not, check out the DraftSociety.com. This podcast is brought to you by the DraftSociety.com. So check that out because that is where you're going to get all of your draft information, rankings, articles, analysis, everything. We've got a huge draft kit that comes out before each season. But if you're joining us mid-season, obviously there are many articles that come out weekly there to prepare you for different game weeks for the fantasy draft season. But also, there are insider benefits as well if you are willing to check that out. It's called the Inner Circle, and we do have some really tasty benefits that we think should entice you, if just in case you do want to get your feet wet and jump right into this draft game. So, all right, let's talk about the draft. All right, so you have everyone together, you're ready to go. How do we go about doing this? Well, in the draft, the most normal way, the way to actually kind of that most people are familiar with the drafting process is what we call a serpentine or a snake draft. Now, what that means is that you're going to give a draft slot number to each manager in your league. Now, each of these managers will know that they are drafting 4th, they're drafting 6th, they're drafting 1st, whatever it may be. So they can then plan for their draft accordingly. You want to make sure that people know this ahead of time so that they can draft prep and they can plan and they can sort of try to map out as best they can the picks that they want to make. Conversely, there is a school of thought that would say that you actually randomly pick draft slots on the day of. This is kind of a devilish little way to keep people on their toes and make sure that even the veterans among you, if there are any, are not going to have a leg up when it comes to the draft day preparations. So that's something to think about. But in a normal serpentine or a snake draft, you have drawn your draft slots ahead of time. And let's say I got draft slot number 2. So on the initial draft, in round 1, there would be a gentleman or a lady ahead of me who has draft slot number 1. Let's pretend that they take Mohamed Salah. Okay, I'm cursing my luck. Bummer. I wish I had number 1, but it is what it is. I'm going to go ahead and draft 2nd, and I will take Kevin De Bruyne, please. He is now on my team. I have drafted him. Now, In the normal snake or serpentine draft, we have everyone else in the league drafting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now, what makes this a serpentine draft is the fact that after number 12 picks, or depending on how many you have in your league, so maybe it's number 8, maybe it's number 10, whoever the last person in the league is in round 1 to take a player, that person then turns around and they get the first pick in round 2, right? So then it completely reverses itself. Think the little snake game that you used to play on your old school cell phone, if you're old enough, like me, to remember that. Anyway, so this is why it's serpentine, right? Because it doubles back on itself. So me having that second pick in this fake draft that we're envisioning in our minds here, I started out with Kevin De Bruyne. So let's say it comes back to me, and obviously the last pick in that second round is going to be 24 if there are 12 teams. Well, I have the 23rd pick, right? So I had to wait quite a while. This is what actually helps with the parity of the league, meaning the overall fairness, making sure that the teams are relatively fair. You see, the person who drafted 12th, they also got the 13th pick. And so those two players in combination should theoretically kind of even out the fact that I got an absolutely elite player, but now I have to wait until 23rd to take my next pick. Hopefully that makes sense. So I will take my pick 23rd. Then the person who picked first and got Salah, they're going to take the 24th and then the 25th pick, which is actually the first pick of round 3. I will then get the second pick of round 3. Hopefully you see what I'm kind of explaining here. And the draft proceeds this way, snaking back and forth, trying to create as much parity or fairness or competitive spirit as possible in the league based upon the way that the league kind of snakes back and forth. This is sort of your normal league. This is sort of the normal way that leagues will draft. And depending on whether you have 8, 10, 12, it doesn't really matter. Most leagues will use this serpentine or this snake format. Now, when you are setting up your actual league itself, it's important to figure out among your league mates how you want to draft. And when I say how, I don't mean the snake or the serpentine style that I was just explaining to you. Instead, how do you want to draft? Meaning, do you want to have a live draft where everybody's together at once in person? Those are the best kind of drafts. If you can do this, do it, please. It is incredible. And even better, if you can manage this, have a whiteboard or have a giant poster board where you actually write down every pick. It is transcendent. Absolutely amazing experience. Have the lads, if there's any ladies in your league, bravo. Get everyone together and just do a live draft. Even better, I've seen it where leagues will arrange a getaway for the weekend and all the lads hang out maybe on a Friday night. Just have fun. Do as you do, however you let loose with your friends, with your league mates, and then on Saturday, prepare for the draft. It's like none other. If you can't do that, however, many places have live online draft capabilities. Fantrax being our favorite, just because of the customizability. Is that a... Yep, that's a word. We're going to go with it. Customizability. And also the FPL site, their draft game does have live drafting capabilities. I believe that Draft Fantasy does as well. So it doesn't really matter what draft platform that you are using, but instead just the fact that everybody can get on. You can use the app or the website, and you can draft live with your friends, with your league mates. Now you can set how long you want each draft pick to take. It can be 30 seconds. That's pretty brutal, but hey, if you got veterans, go for it. It can be a minute. It can be 2 minutes. Or you can do what is called a slow draft. A slow draft, I don't know if it's capable on the FPL site with their draft their draft game that they have, but I do know that it's possible on Fantrax. But basically, this is where you set a number of hours for a team to be able to make their pick. This is particularly helpful for people who are either A, really unsure of what they're doing. You want as much time as possible to make your decision, and you're not on the clock. Maybe you start this draft in like late July, and you got 2 weeks before the season starts, and you're fine, you're good. And so maybe you decide to do a slow draft, because let's not rush anyone. Let's give people all the time they need. You can have 12 hours to make your pick. And it sounds like a long time, but some picks are going to be done in 5 minutes, and some picks are going to be done in 4 hours. But the other way, B, the reason why you want to use this is I see this a lot in online leagues, like the community league on Twitter. Check out hashtag DraftPL or hashtag DPL, or the International Genie League on Twitter. Shout out to Draft Society founder, the Draft Genie. Check him out on Twitter. But these international leagues where you have players from around the world, it really helps because of the time zone difference to be able to have these slow drafts. Now, all this being said, some people absolutely abhor, they hate slow drafts. Some people don't mind them. Some people are in the middle. So it depends on you and your league, how you want to approach this, but certainly there are options. You can do a live draft in person. You can do a live online draft where you set the time limit based upon how long you want to give people to make their pick. And if they don't in that amount of time, well, guess what? Your pick just got made for you, and you take whatever the next auto pick player is. Or you can set up a slow draft, which is where you give people as long as they need to make a pick, and you're going to be really nice and really amicable to those new managers who really need more time, or those managers who are in an alternate time zone who maybe need that extra time to make their pick. So those are the ways you can set up the actual draft itself. And this is just running that normal serpentine snake draft like we mentioned earlier, and just making sure that everything goes according to plan. Obviously, your commissioner has the ability to roll back any draft picks that were mistaken, any draft picks that didn't go the way that the person planned. Obviously, you have to use your judgment as to whether or not you want to go ahead and roll something back. But I find that being pretty trustworthy in your league mates, especially in this drafting process, as long as it's not 2, 3, 4 draft picks in the future. If they pick something or they run out of time and they're like, I was about to pick this guy, but I just ran out of time. I mean, if you're a new league, just be nice. There's time for your league to get really dug in, and there's time for your league to get really competitive. In years to come, your league can implement strict penalties if somebody finishes last, or you can do something really embarrassing, or whatever you want. But when you're just starting out, I find that it's best to err on the side of compassion and give that person, if they need a couple extra minutes to make their pick, or just a minute extra to make their pick, whatever it is, just be compassionate about it. Anyway, okay. Moving on, so you know how to set up a snake draft. You know the options in terms of the time frame or the location. Are you live? Are you on the computer? Are you in one location where you can do a live draft, or are you around the world where you might want to do a slow draft? You know about all this. Now, let's mix it up completely. There are some other ways to do a draft as well, and the main one that we see is called an auction draft. This is very, very different. This would be mainly recommended for people who are veterans of the draft game, but I have heard of people getting into this right away, just as their first sort of foray into the draft game. In a strange way, it actually does bridge pretty well from the salary cap game, because each player is assigned a value. The difference is, instead of FPL assigning that value to the player, it's you assigning that value to the player. Let me tell you how an auction draft functions. So, okay, I'm going to just make this very easy. We're going to have 4 players in this league, okay? I don't recommend it, but just for the sake of this explanation, we have 4 players in this league, right? Okay, so there's 4 players. Player 1, again, I'll be player 2, player 3, and player 4. So it does there is a serpentine aspect to it, but it's much different than before. So let me tell you, I'll walk you through step by step how it works. Player 1, it is your turn to nominate a player. This is how the draft starts. All right. So player 1, you decide to nominate Mohamed Salah. Okay. So what that means is that you have asked the rest of the league to go ahead and place their bids for Mohamed Salah, right? Whoever goes first, and I believe as player 2, I would have the first ability to go ahead and place my bid. So out of a budget that you can set, but let's say its budget's $100, £100, right? And you can set the budget, but honestly, I'd go 100 or 1,000 just to make things nice and even, and then the numbers become more comprehensible, if that makes sense. But okay, let's say it's 100. So I'm player 2. Player 1 has just nominated Mohamed Salah, which means Mohamed Salah is up to be bid upon right now. And whoever wins this bid brings him into their team, but it does so at a cost to your overall budget. So elite players are going to cost 50% of your budget or more. So for example, in a draft or in an auction league this coming year, which is the 22-23 season, although you could be listening to this podcast 3 years from now and it would still be relevant, hopefully. But Mohamed Salah is going to be, hopefully, again, the best forward. I say so as a Liverpool fan. Sorry, anybody who despises Liverpool. But anyway, is what it is. So Mohamed Salah is probably, maybe him or son, going to be the best forward in the game. So he's just been nominated by player 1. I'm player 2, and I have the chance to go ahead and make my first bid. I'm going to bid £47. I'm going to bid $47. So player 3 now has a choice to make. And actually, at this point, it opens up. Anybody else in the league can make a bid. And what you need to do is beat my bid, right? And you're given a certain amount of time to do it. If the timer runs out, I win that player for whatever I bid. Think of it like eBay in a way, right? If anybody still uses eBay. So I've bid the 47. Now it's up to the rest of the managers in the league, including player 1, actually, who nominated this player. But now player 1 can actually come in and bid on this player as well. So basically, let's say player 4 bids $49. Player 1 then bids $53. I come back in. I bid $60. Player 3 then says $63, and I say, nope, too rich for my blood. Timer runs out, and player 3 brings in Mohamed Salah to their team for $63. Of course, they're now dealing with the fact that they, only have $37 left for the rest of their draft, which should make you a little bit scared, but at the same time, you've just brought in a top player. So you can see in auction leagues, it's a bit of a give and take. You need to figure out what your balance is between bringing in top talent and bringing in guys who are either unknown or underrated. Because later in the draft, you'll be able to bring guys in for $3, $2, $1, even $0 later. So let's say I nominate from Fulham, who, depending on when you're listening to this again, is just coming back into the Premier League, and I nominate Tosin Adorabioyo. Adorabioyo? I think that's how you say his name. Anyway, that's who I nominated. And nobody bids on him. But before the timer runs out, I bid $0. And so I've just brought him into my team for $0 or £0. Solid move. I mean, depending on your scoring system, but solid move, right? But there are players that you can do this with. For example, let's say Andros Townsend. He's been injured for however long now. And maybe people have forgotten about him. Maybe I think he's going to get a run back in the team this year. So I wait until sort of near the end of the auction draft. I nominate him. No one else seems interested. Maybe one player bids $1, £1, and I say, I'll take him for 2. And timer runs out. I've just brought in Dros for 2. Great, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to only spend money on these marquee, these world-class players. There is a lot of strategy around team building and trying to find kind of diamonds in the rough. You also need to be able to recognize value when you are doing an auction draft. So these are all really important things to keep in mind if you are doing an auction draft. And if you never have, just maybe get a few guys together and just try it just for fun. Even just do a mock draft, but in the auction style. It's very interesting. It's an experience like you've never had before. If you've done draft even before, you've never experienced anything like an auction. There's just a few things to make sure of. Make sure that your timer is set appropriately. Make sure it's not too long. You want to put pressure on people a little bit to make bids, but you also want to let them think about what they're going to be doing. Make sure you set your budgets carefully. Make sure you do your research, kind of know who your premium players are. And then there's a whole strategy around who you nominate. So do you nominate a player that you actually want, or do you nominate players that you don't want? Because then when you nominate a player, that player has to go to a team, right? Well, not necessarily, but you are forcing everyone to make a decision on that player. So if that player is going to go to a team, then he has to do so when you nominate him, right? If he doesn't, then he goes to the waiver wire, right? Then you can pick him up later on after the draft, and he's in kind of like that waiver wire general pool of players that you can pick up. But let's say I have no interest in drafting Fred, right? I have no interest in drafting Fred onto my team. But if I nominate him, that's going to mean that if anybody wants to roster Fred, bring Fred into their team this season, they would have to nominate, or they would have to draft him now. They would have to bid on him now. So this can create a really interesting situation. So let's say I'm not the biggest fan of Cristiano Ronaldo, right? I respect his goals, but I don't think that aside from that, he does a whole lot on the pitch. So really early in the draft, I go ahead and I nominate Ronaldo. Well, he's going to bring some big bucks in. What I'm doing is I'm not interested in rostering him. I'm not interested in bringing him into my team. But I am burning other players' budget by bringing him up, knowing that he's a player that I'm not interested in. So I'll sit this one out, and I'll let someone else spend their money. What's the potential pitfall of that? Well, maybe someone gets a deal on him because no one else wants him either, and the player who has belief in him, who is going to go ahead and stick their neck out for him, gets him at a deal, gets him at a cut rate. It's certainly possible. So these are all things to think about when you are doing an auction draft. It's wild. It is interesting. It's crazy, but it's fun. If you have a chance, check it out. Finally, before we close her up here today on this latest Draft 101, let's talk about a couple of ways to kind of spice up drafts, make things interesting. So a couple of ways that I've heard of where leagues who kind of want to make things more interesting, who want to make things more suspenseful during the draft, can do that. First of all, allow trading of draft picks. So it's hard when you get players involved, right, in this particular case, because the draft is either live or it's happening shortly. Like, let's say it's happening in a couple of days. In this case, there's no players at all to be traded. But if you are in person and you are drafting live in person, let's say you have an intermission or something to go grab a couple pints. Well, at that point, you might have half your team drafted. What if you made a rule where you could not only trade draft picks, your future draft picks, but you could also trade the players that you've already drafted? it makes for some very interesting conversations and a very hectic but quite entertaining experience. So that's one way I've seen it. If you don't want to include the players, then just allow the trading of draft picks. So if somebody wants to trade a third and a fourth round draft pick for a second round draft pick, then maybe make it possible to do so. It can only make the draft more interesting. People are just taking gambles. That's what this game is about. So people are taking a gamble based upon where they think they're finding value. And honestly, more often than not, as far as trades go, I think who are we as a league to say that somebody's valuation of a player or of a draft pick is wrong? So let them try it out. And as long as it's not absolutely clear that somebody's being taken advantage of, give them the opportunity to go ahead and try it. So if somebody wants 2 second-round picks, but they're willing to give up their third and their fourth, I mean, it seems like a ballsy move, but let them give it a shot. So that's one way to potentially do it, to bring some more excitement and interest to your draft. Another way to do this is to have sort of like a live ticker or a live, like I said, a draft board if you're in person, where you can kind of see the draft as it goes, and then afterwards give awards out to certain managers. And these awards can be tracked throughout the season. So go ahead and award who you think got the best draft. And this has to be, agreed upon by maybe votes in the league. You could do a blind vote if you wanted to, but best draft, do worst draft, best pick, worst pick, best value pick, worst value pick, right? And these are all things that you can track throughout the course of the season and see if they actually come to fruition. Maybe you could tie some money into it. Maybe you could give the person who is awarded worst value pick, you can give them some money if it turns out that they weren't the worst value pick, or maybe they have to do something embarrassing, or they have to donate some money or buy a round if indeed they did have the worst value pick, based upon what the league voted at the end of the draft. Anyway, there are a million different ways to keep the draft interesting, but let's be honest, the draft in and of itself is the reason why we're here. That's exactly why we play this game. Draft day is an absolute holiday. It is everything that we prepare for, that we've been waiting for. Don't get me wrong, leagues are not won on draft day. But man, it sure does help to set a good base for your team. And not only that, more importantly, even, let's say, the camaraderie built on draft day, the absolute just ravaging of your nerves. But I say this in the best way possible. The ravaging of your nerves, where you are on edge for the entire draft. You're worrying, hoping you made the right pick. And you're prepared. You hope you're prepared. You feel like you're prepared. But man, all bets are off when it's actually draft time. And when you are on the clock, it is a frenetic feeling of just you feel like you've never heard any of these players' names before. What am I doing? Where am I? Who am I? What's the meaning of life? But you swallow all that down and you make the best pick you possibly can. This is why we play this game. The draft game is just fantastic. And so I hope if you are listening and you've never experienced the draft game, it's time to check it out. Get at us on Twitter if you are not in a league. We will get you set up with a league. We'll try to figure out some sort of online community league that you can join. Hopefully it can have other people who are kind of newer to the game. But whatever your case is, let us know. Get at us on Twitter. Hit up the Draft Society. Hit me up at JWillDraft. Hit up the Key Pass Collective. All of these things are on Twitter. DM us and just let us know. I'm interested in this game, but I've never been a part of a league before, and I'd love to check it out. We'll try to get you hooked up as best we can. So as draft season is upon us, and again, if you're listening to this when it's not upon us, hold your horses until July / early August, and just like that, send us a message, because we'd love to get you hooked into this community, wonderful, supportive, really positive community, and get you get the draft game's barbs stuck in you, so that you really know the joy of this game and the joy that it can bring you. We hope to see you. We hope to talk to you on Twitter. We hope to see you in our leagues. We hope to make your acquaintance. And if you're still on the fence, if you're still wondering, just do it. Just make the step. Let's get you involved in a draft, and you can see how awesome it is. All right, this has been the Key Pass Collective. YouTube, if you're listening, go ahead and hit subscribe, like us, and follow us. Hit that bell. We appreciate everybody who's listening, whether you are on your phone, on the podcast app, whether you are on Spotify, whether you're on YouTube. It doesn't matter. Community, we love you. We'll talk to you all very soon. This has been your latest Draft 101. And if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to hit me up on DMs. Cheers.